My name is Ashley Carter, and I was 17 when I realized that sometimes losing everything you thought you had is the only way to find yourself. I had just returned from a week-long school trip, exhausted but proud. It was not one of those fancy trips paid by the school. No, I had earned every dollar myself, tutoring after school, dog-sitting on weekends, selling handmade earrings online. I fought for that trip like my life depended on it, and despite the motion sickness that turned every bus ride into a personal battle, despite the homesickness that tugged at me during quiet nights, I had made it. As I dragged my suitcase up the front steps, my heart felt light. I had even picked up small souvenirs for my family, a wooden bookmark for my mom who loved to read when life calms down, a silly keychain for my dad, and a rare set of handmade charcoal pencils for my sister Samantha, who dreamed of becoming an artist. I imagined the moment I would walk in, drop my bag in the hallway, and fall onto my bed, maybe with a dramatic little groan for effect. Maybe my family would smile. Maybe my sister would say thank you just once without the usual sigh or eye roll. But when I opened the door that day, nothing went the way I had pictured. Instead, I stepped into a house that smelled faintly of acrylic paint, where distant music floated from upstairs, and where my mother greeted me with a casual, "Oh, you're back," as if I had just gone out for a carton of milk. I should have known right then. Something was gone, not just my room, but a piece of me I would never get back. I climbed the stairs slowly, dragging my duffel bag behind me. Every step felt heavier, my body aching for the comfort I had dreamed of all week. But as I reached the top, my heart thudded against my ribs. My door, or what used to be my door, was wide open. And beyond it, my world had been erased. The walls, once covered in my posters and photos, were painted over in bright, glaring white. An easel stood where my bed had been. Sketches and paintings were pinned up haphazardly. Art supplies littered every surface. In the center of it all was Samantha, headphones on, completely absorbed in her work. She did not even look up when I entered. "Careful where you step," she called over her shoulder. The floor still drying. I stood frozen, the duffel slipping from my grasp. My bed, my bookshelves, even my old creaky chair gone, replaced by the dream studio Samantha had always begged for. I turned and stumbled back downstairs, my mind reeling. In the living room, my dad was lounging on the couch, watching some wildlife documentary like nothing unusual had happened. He glanced at me briefly. "Hey, kiddo," he said, "don't be selfish. Your sister needs the space for her portfolio." Selfish. The word hit harder than any slammed door ever could. "What about my stuff?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's boxed up in the garage," he replied, not even looking away from the screen. "You can grab it whenever." I waited for my mother to chime in, to say something that made sense of it all, but she only shrugged from the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "You'll be 18 soon anyway," she said. It was time. No apology, no warning, no space for me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the house keys I had carried since I was 13. Without a word, I walked into the kitchen and placed them on the counter. The metallic clink echoed in the silent room. "Where are you going?" my mother asked, her voice sharper now. "You're not even 18 yet." "Don't be dramatic," my father added lazily, not even bothering to turn his head. But it was not drama. It was clarity. I picked up my bag again and walked out the front door, stepping into the late afternoon air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft pink and orange hues, a beautiful evening, indifferent to the quiet heartbreak unfolding beneath it. No one followed. And no one called out my name. The house I had called home for 17 years stood behind me, smaller now, like a place I had only imagined. As I walked down the sidewalk, one thought repeated in my mind, louder than anything else. They did not even ask if I got home safe. The truth is, losing my room was not the real betrayal. It was just the final, undeniable proof of something I had spent years trying not to see. Growing up, Samantha and I were only 2 years apart. You might think that would make us close, but it didn't. She was always the fragile one, the gifted artist, the dreamer wrapped in layers of praise and protection. I was the independent one, the easy child, the one they could forget because I never made enough noise to demand attention. At first, I wore that title like a badge of honor. "You're so mature, Ashley. You're so responsible. You're so low maintenance." But over time, those words became something heavier, something lonelier. When Samantha wanted art classes, my parents signed her up without hesitation, no matter the cost. When I asked to join a writing workshop across town, I was told it was too far, too inconvenient. When Samantha broke the toaster, it was an accident. When I dropped a dish, it was carelessness. When Samantha forgot her lunch, my dad rushed to deliver it. When I forgot mine, I was reminded that I was old enough to take care of myself. I learned early not to expect much. On birthdays, Samantha had elaborate parties, custom cakes, decorations, friends from every corner of her life. Mine were often an afterthought. A grocery store cake, maybe a gift card tucked inside a card signed with a rushed "love you." Still, I clung to the good moments. A distracted compliment on my report card. A used book my mother bought because she thought I might like it. Crumbs. Really, but when you're starving, crumbs feel like a feast. As I grew older, the gap widened. By 16, I had my own part-time job, paid my own phone bill, scheduled my own doctor appointments. They praised me for it. She's so independent. She never causes trouble. But what they really meant was, she doesn't need us. And if she doesn't need us, we don't have to try. Meanwhile, Samantha could cry over a broken pencil and get a replacement set by the next day. I remember once passing out from a fever in the bathroom. When I woke up hours later, the house was empty. Mom was shopping, Dad was working, Samantha was at her art club. No one had even noticed. I didn't tell them. What would have been the point? You learn not to scream into a void that never echoes back. That was the kind of love I grew up with, soft, polite, and conditional. They said they loved me, and maybe, in their way, they did. But love without presence is just a word. And I was done clinging to words that did not hold me when I needed them most. By the time I left that house, I was not just leaving behind a bedroom. I was leaving behind a lifetime of being almost loved, almost seen, almost enough. Part 3, Nowhere to Belong, 500 words. I did not have a plan when I walked away. No dramatic speech, no backup strategy. Just a duffel bag, a handful of souvenirs, and a heavy, hollow feeling inside my chest. At first, I called my best friend Haley. She picked up on the first ring and told me to come over. Her family had always been kind, and they let me sleep on their living room couch for a few days. I was grateful, truly. But gratitude does not erase the feeling of being a guest in someone else's life. Every morning, I folded the blanket neatly, hid my duffel behind the couch, and made myself as small as possible. I could feel it in the air, the way Haley's mother smiled a little too tightly, the way conversations hushed when I entered a room. "Are you sure your parents are okay with this?" they would ask. I would nod and lie, because what else could I do? I told myself it was temporary. I just needed to make it through the last few weeks of school. Finals were coming. Graduation was so close I could almost taste it. But when you are living out of a duffel bag, even a few weeks feels endless. I worked a part-time job after school, grabbing extra shifts where I could. I studied late at night under dim lamps, using borrowed textbooks and cheap notebooks. I skipped meals more often than I admitted, stretching every dollar because I did not want to burden anyone more than I already was. The worst part was the silence. Not once did my parents call. Not once did they text. No, "Are you okay?" No, "When are you coming home?" Nothing. It should have shattered me. But honestly, it just confirmed what I already knew. They did not miss me. They did not even notice I was gone. I stopped answering questions at school. I told the counselors that I was staying with extended family, technically true, if you squinted hard enough. I avoided friends who asked too many questions. I kept my head down, counting the days until my 18th birthday like a prisoner marking the walls of a cell. 10 days. That was all I needed. 10 days and I would be legally an adult, legally free, legally invisible. At night, lying awake on Haley's couch, I wondered what adulthood would even mean for me. No graduation party, no family photos, no care packages or college funds. Just me alone, trying to stitch together a future from scraps. Some nights, I let myself cry quietly into the pillow. Not the big, ugly sobs you see in movies, just silent tears slipping out, because there was nowhere else for the sadness to go. I was not looking for a miracle. I just wanted to survive long enough to find a place where I mattered. Even if that place was one I would have to build entirely on my own. When the weight of everything became too much, I found myself standing outside a small, weathered building on the other side of town. The sign read Maple Grove Assisted Living. Inside, In room 112 lived the one person who had never needed reminding that I existed. My grandmother, Evelyn Monroe. I had not visited her nearly enough in the past year. Life, school, work, it was always too noisy, too full of reasons to postpone the quiet. But now, standing there with nothing but a duffel bag and the sting of being unwanted, I needed her more than I ever had. When she opened the door, her face lit up in a way that broke something open inside me. "Something's happened," she said immediately, her voice soft but certain. I tried to laugh it off, to pretend I was just dropping by. We sat at her little table with its crocheted cloth and drank tea that tasted faintly of boiled water and hope. I told her about the trip, the art studio, the boxed-up life sitting in the garage. I tried to make it sound funny, light, no big deal. But somewhere between the second and third mug of tea, the dam broke. I told her everything about the quiet neglect, about the years feeling like a background character, about the couch, the silence, the growing fear that maybe I really was as disposable as it felt. When I finished, I stared at my hands, waiting for pity or hollow comfort. Instead, Grandma leaned back in her chair, folded her hands over her lap, and said, "Good." I blinked. "Good." "Good, you're out," she said firmly. "Scoot, they don't get to put you back now." I did not know what to say, so she kept going, her voice steady in a way that wrapped around me like armor. "You have spent your whole life making yourself smaller to fit into a space that was never built for you. Now you get to build your own." She reached into her nightstand and pulled out a thick envelope, bound with a rubber band and slightly worn at the edges. "It's not much," she said, "not yet, but it's a start." Inside was no money, not directly. There were documents, bank information, legal forms, a letter to her attorney. She had been preparing this for a long time. I protested immediately. "Grandma, I can't take anything from you. I don't want you to give up anything." She cut me off with a wave of her hand. "I'm not giving up," she said. "I'm giving too. Big difference." There, scribbled in her careful handwriting on the topmost paper, was a line that made my throat close up. "I can't give you a home," she had written, "but I can give you a way out." I clutched the envelope to my chest like it was a life raft, because in many ways it was. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. Her lawyer confirmed everything was in place. She could not transfer everything until I turned 18, but she could help me with what she called preparation funds, enough for a security deposit, a few essentials, a beginning. I found a tiny studio apartment, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, but it was mine. I signed a short-term lease and paid up front. The first night, I slept on the floor with nothing but a blanket and my duffel bag as a pillow. And it felt more like home than anywhere else ever had. Every afternoon after school, I visited Grandma. We filled out forms, watched bad game shows, laughed at the contestants' silly answers. She told me stories I had never heard before, about her first job, her secret love of motorcycles, the time she won a pie-eating contest at a county fair. In those stolen moments of quiet and laughter, I started piecing myself back together. Not as someone's afterthought, but as my own beginning. The studio was small, barely big enough for a twin mattress, a fold-out desk, and a second-hand dresser picked up from a thrift store. But it was mine. Every square inch of that place whispered freedom. I bought a mattress on sale and dragged it up 3 flights of stairs by myself. I picked out a cheap lamp and a set of mismatched dishes. I used a milk crate as a nightstand. It was not glamorous, but it was the first time in my life that every object in a room belonged to me, because I chose it, not because it was handed down or left over. There were moments of fear, of course. Nights when the wind rattled the old windows and I wondered if I had made a mistake. Afternoons when the fridge was almost empty and payday felt too far away. But even in the hardest moments, I never once regretted leaving. Because now I had something I had never really known before: ownership over my own life. I worked part-time shifts at a local grocery store, stocked shelves, cleaned floors, learned the small routines of independence. I budgeted carefully, saving every extra dollar. I studied at night, determined not to let everything I had fought for slip away. And every day after school, I visited Grandma. Those visits became the anchor to my new life. We would sit together, drinking lukewarm tea, watching reruns of old game shows. Sometimes we filled out paperwork for my college applications. Sometimes we just talked about nothing and everything. She told me stories of her younger days, about how she once dreamed of traveling across the country in a camper van, how she had learned to bake pies from her mother, how she had saved nickels and dimes hidden in coffee cans to buy her first car. She made me believe that beginnings do not have to be loud or grand. Sometimes they start with a quiet choice to keep going. One evening, as we sat together in her tiny room, she squeezed my hand and said, "You're building something beautiful, Ashley. Piece by piece." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So I kept building even when it was hard, even when it was lonely, even when the silence from my old life still echoed in my chest. Because for the first time, I was not waiting for someone to see me, to choose me, to make space for me. I was making space for myself. And that space, no matter how small, was sacred. It was the foundation of a life that belonged only to me, a life stitched together, not from obligation or apology, but from the quiet, stubborn belief that I deserved more than just survival. I deserved to live. It was a Tuesday evening when the past came knocking, literally. I had just finished a long shift at the grocery store and was peeling off my sneakers when I heard 3 sharp raps on the door. Not the hesitant knock of a neighbor or the casual tap of a friend. It was the kind of knock that already felt like an accusation. I hesitated. My heart thudded in my chest as I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Standing there, side by side, were my parents. I stared, frozen. It had been weeks. Not a call, not a text, not even a message asking if I was alive. And now here they were, on my doorstep like ghosts from a life I had tried to leave behind. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then my father raised his hand, not in greeting but holding something, a thick manila envelope. I knew before I opened the door that this was not an apology. It was a demand. When I finally cracked the door open, my mother spoke first, her voice tight and businesslike. "We need to talk," she said. "You have responsibilities to this family." I looked at the envelope, heavy and bulging with paperwork. It was not love that had brought them here. It was inconvenience. I felt it deep in my bones, the understanding that after all the silence, after all the absence, they remembered me only now because they needed something. But I was not the same girl who had stood silent while they boxed up her life. I had built something stronger since then. And I was not about to let them tear it down. I did not invite them inside. I stood in the doorway, the cool air curling around my ankles, and waited. My parents shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing for the first time that they no longer had the upper hand. "We think you should move back home," my father said finally, "at least until you get on your feet." It was almost laughable. After months of silence, after years of treating me like an afterthought, they wanted me to come back, not because they missed me, but because it was easier for them. I shook my head, slow and steady. "I already am on my feet," I said. My mother's mouth tightened. "Ashley, don't be stubborn. Family is family." I thought about all the times I had begged for their attention, their approval, their love, and all the times I had been met with polite indifference. I thought about Grandma Evelyn, saving and planning for years in secret, just so I would have a way out. I thought about my tiny studio, my hard-earned paycheck, my future, that, for the first time, belonged entirely to me. "No," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Family is supposed to mean something. You made it clear what I meant to you." They stared at me, stunned into silence. I closed the door gently, not with anger, but with finality. For a long time I stood there, hand resting on the doorknob, feeling the weight of the moment settle around me. It did not feel like revenge. It did not feel like victory. It felt like freedom. In the days that followed, they tried calling. They left messages, long and guilt-laden, painting themselves as victims of my ungratefulness. I listened to none of them. I moved forward step by tiny step, breath by hard-won breath. Graduation came. I walked across that stage without a cheering section, without flowers waiting for me at the end. But when I looked out into the audience, I found Grandma Evelyn standing proudly with her cane and a beaming smile that could have lit up the entire auditorium. I waved to her. I waved to myself, to the girl who had finally learned that love, real love, is not a debt to be repaid. It is a gift to be treasured. Today I am still building my life. Some days are hard, some nights are lonelier than I would like. But every morning when I wake up in my little studio, I know exactly who I am. I am not someone's backup plan. I am not someone's easy convenience. I am not disposable. I am enough. And if you are reading this, wondering if you are allowed to walk away from the people who only remember you When it serves them, let me tell you, you are. You deserve more than crumbs. You deserve a life that feels like yours. If you have ever had to choose yourself, leave a comment below. Share your story. Let's remind each other that surviving is brave, but thriving is the real victory. My God, why don't you just disappear? Those words hit me harder than I expected.